Do you actually know what the definition of fake news is? It's a great question once posed by philosopher king Don Lemon.
Do you actually know what the definition of fake news is?
What we're doing right now.
And that's a pretty good on-the-spot answer from Don's guest, Paris Denard. But Don's got a more detailed definition for us.
Fake news is when you put out a story to intentionally deceive someone and you know that it is wrong.
That's a decent definition, but it's one that's a little too restrictive, in my opinion. Perhaps it's that the term fake is too harsh to describe a widespread problem we all observe in media, though there's no denying its catchiness.
You are fake news.
In my mind, fake news need not be outright fabrication in order to give a presentation that is as misleading as outright fabrication. Fake news is a question of priorities. Is the coverage looking to provide the truth, or is the coverage looking to advance a narrative? And you can advance a narrative in many ways without outright inventing information or evidence. You can omit key information that doesn't fit the desired narrative, or you can emphasize or embellish information that does fit the desired narrative. To offer my own definition, I consider fake news to be news that cares more about influencing your conclusion than it does about providing you with the truthful and complete information you need to reach your own conclusion about any given event. Now, that's a broad rule that admittedly leaves a lot of gray area for questions of journalistic ethics. What counts as omission? What counts as embellishment? And what liberties should a reporter have to present you with the story the reporter wants to tell? Those are precisely the questions CNN's current controversy challenges. And after reviewing the facts of this case several times, I'm still not certain exactly where I stand on these questions. In this case, I see both elements of truth and elements of theatrics, which is why I'm very curious to see where the audience lands. I'll give you the facts as I understand them, tell you where I lean, and leave you with a poll to see where most of you guys stand. On Sunday, cell phone footage went viral on Twitter, originating with user Marcantro, who was on scene at a CNN International live broadcast set in London, covering the aftermath of Saturday night's attack. The footage shows a small group of Muslim protesters taking CNN's stage, at certain points being directed positionally by the reporter and production staff, before the broadcast returns live and the reporter describes the scene before her.
What I want to show you now, viewers, is a wonderful scene. These are Muslim mums. There's a little fella here who's bought a little sign, and this is in commemoration. You can see his little sign to the heroes of London. There are flowers on the street here. Ladies with hashtag turn to love, hashtag ISIS equals enemies of Islam. A poignant scene, and a scene we should sit on just for you viewers to understand exactly how people feel here on the streets of London.
And this cell phone footage of the set being arranged was picked up by influential Twitter accounts, prompting a response from a few CNN accounts. Responding to accusations of staging the scene and faking news, CNN International's PR account replied, "This is nonsense. Police let demonstrators through the cordon to show their signs. CNN, along with other media, simply filmed them doing so." CNN's Brian Stelter commented, "Far-right Twitterers are misleading folks about this video. Bloggers saying CNN was caught, quote, staging fake news. Police allowed demonstrators through cordon so they could show their signs to media," CNN PR says. CNN, BBC, AP, quote, simply filmed them doing so. It's not stated explicitly, but the implication I understand from these statements from CNN personnel is the protesters made an independent decision to enter the CNN stage, that police let them in, that CNN and other networks simply gave them a set on which to present their messages. So what exactly is fake here? I've seen two distinct things suspected or alleged. The first is the protesters themselves, and the second is the scene presented on the newscast. I've seen questions circulating about the authenticity of the protesters. Are they real? Are they plants? In my estimation, there's enough evidence to conclude there's nothing inauthentic about the protesters themselves. Throughout Sunday, these protesters appeared in coverage by several networks, including Fox, The Guardian, and Getty Images. If the widespread and varied coverage of these protesters isn't enough to convince you the protesters are authentic, the BBC reports they are members of the London Fatwa Council, with the organization's chair participating. Cross-referencing this chairman with the organization's website and the on-scene footage checks out to me, and I am satisfied that the protesters depicted are genuine demonstrators. How about the news scene presented by CNN? What's fake there? I've seen claims that CNN provided these protesters with props. I don't see evidence of that in the footage, and their signs look consistent with the other media coverage of this group. But I do see two noteworthy things in this footage. One, the fact that the protesters are entering a preset stage they were not occupying organically. And two, the moments at which the reporter and set staff direct them to crowd together to fit into the scene. The major question to me is whether these protesters entered the scene entirely upon their own request, or if CNN coaxed them into entering the scene. Both scenarios are plausible to me. I can see protesters asking for access to a news stage on which to amplify their message, and I can see CNN trying to push a desired narrative. We do know that sources say these protesters were already protesting very near the existing CNN shoot, and by all accounts, that demonstration was entirely of their own volition. So to me, the fakeness of this report comes down to the authenticity of the stage on which it was presented. Did the protesters enter that stage upon their own request, or were they summoned to that stage in order to forward a narrative? The best way to make that judgment would be to ask the protesters themselves. But let's say these protesters did enter the scene upon their own request, and CNN simply allowed them onto the set. I still think we're getting a somewhat inauthentic view of what actually happened in London, a view that wouldn't exist were it not for CNN's presence. So is it fake news in the sense that it's fabrication? Not quite, but is it a scene that existed organically? Not quite either. What this case really highlights is the philosophy of what a reporter's job is or should be. Does a reporter report the news or influence it, even create it? Is a reporter an observer or a participant? As a practical matter, I'm not sure there's a major distinction between CNN simply getting a shot of the protesters as they were protesting organically and moving them into a location previously set up with lights and a nice backdrop and everything else that goes into a better shot. Both approaches leave us with an image of a group that was in fact independently protesting in London. But as a philosophical matter, as a matter of principle, I do think the difference is much larger. One shot would be a reporter going to the news, a reporter observing the news. And the other shot is, even if only minimally, a reporter influencing the news, arguably manipulating the news. One approach is a reporter taking a photo. The other approach is a reporter painting a picture. And even if we're charitable with CNN, even if we grant their explanation that they simply allowed protesters to enter their set, my question would be, why is it better to allow the protesters to enter your staged set? If the protesters requested coverage, why isn't it better to get footage of them as they were, on the site at which they were actually protesting, arranged according to their own choices, instead of arranged according to CNN staff direction? The approach of filming the protesters as they were seems to me much more aligned with the philosophy that a reporter should present the world as it is observed, as it exists without manipulation or influence, as it exists authentically. But what do you think? Is this presentation merely a matter of philosophical differences between critics and CNN, or are there larger ethical considerations here? I've linked a poll atop the video description, and I'm very curious to see what the results will be. You can, of course, tweet me or email me with your thoughts as well, because I always appreciate that thoughtful discussion. That is MatthewLChristiansen@gmail.com or at MLChristiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.